I'm Pete Bartz, a Senior Systems Engineer at Intuity, and with me today is my colleague John Diamond, who is a Senior Systems and Solutions Engineer. Now, in our previous sessions, we introduced the new ENA dashboards, and we discussed navigation and how the dashboards can be adapted to meet your own specific requirements. In today's session, we're going to highlight some of the other major enhancements in ENA. Some of these features will include new NBAR and Cisco ACI support, some additions and inclusions for cloud monitoring. We'll cover some of the trend analysis and prediction changes that we made in the web charts, and we'll talk about some back-end changes specifically in the area of discovery. As is the norm, if you have any questions, please use the chat panel and we'll have time at the conclusion for any questions that you may have. And as usual, this session will be recorded for your future reference. So JD, with that, I'll turn it over to you to get us started.
Okay, well, thank you very much there, Pete. Just to note, as Pete has said, that in the previous sessions, which are well worth reviewing very shortly, Pat will be sending out the note about how to access the recordings of the previous sessions. We went through how to navigate around the user interface and related issues. Now, we're not going to specifically focus on that today, but where possible, we'll give you some reminders about how that navigation works. As far as the new features that we're going to talk about, let's just have a quick review on what those are, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail. For the cloud support, previously we had provided basic inventory style discovery and monitoring of Amazon's AWS offering. That has now been enhanced to provide live monitoring of the utilization of the virtual machines, that's the resources like CPU and memory and the state of the machine, and also monitoring the traffic in and out of each virtual machine. Very important, the traffic, because that influences how much you have to pay for it in terms of paying Amazon for their service. It's not only how many virtual machine instances you buy from them and various other facilities, but it's also how much traffic goes in and out of those virtual machines. We've extended as well to Microsoft Azure. We've got the same type of monitoring for that cloud offering that we have for Amazon AWS. So you've got both of them. You may be using both, you may only be using one, but whichever, we've got you covered, and we, as far as possible, normalize the way that the data is presented in the dashboards so that it's easy to jump from one to the other and to jump to what you've got being monitored on premises. We've extended the metrics that are being gathered, particularly in the area of storage, for the VMware offerings. So typically through VMware vCenter Server, you'll be monitoring your hypervisors for your on-premises deployment, and you may well have a hybrid of on-premises and one or more cloud vendors. So we've got a consistent way of presenting the information. Although it's gathered differently, it's presented in a consistent way across them. I'll show you that in just a moment. We've also got two specific Cisco technologies. One of them, the Cisco ACI, which is their application-centric infrastructure, is their approach to an SDN philosophy behind controlling and configuring data center switched infrastructures. And that is where you split the control and data planes, with the data plane being the responsibility of the physical switches and the control aspects being centralized in what's called an APIC. And the APIC is actually a lump of software that's typically running on a VM, but its responsibility is to configure and control the switching hardware from one central location. We can take the APIC under management and show you how that's configured and various aspects of what's going on, including problems and alerting you when you need to pay attention to do something about those problems. NBAR is a technology that's been around from Cisco for a few years now. In fact, there's two versions. There's the original NBAR and there's NBAR 2. They're very similar. NBAR 2 extends the concept, but primarily it's there to give you visibility into the mix of applications flowing in and out of ports on devices, typically Cisco routers and devices, Cisco devices with routing capability. And it goes deeper than you typically get from flow monitoring, in that it uses deep packet inspection within the routers to break apart traffic that would be sharing the same TCP or UDP port. For example, you might have a bunch of separate applications flowing which are using secure HTTP, HTTPS. So that is able to be broken apart by configuration in the router to identify different traffic associated with different applications, even though it's all sharing the same port. Rather than focusing on the flows, which is what flow monitoring does, where you've got the flows being sent from the devices, such as routers, to the management system, and you end up with a lot of data coming back from the devices in order to be able to figure out what's going on. So it's a heavyweight operation. With NBAR, it's not giving you information about who's talking to who. It's just analyzing and breaking out the traffic on the circuit. So it's a lighter weight approach. There's less management traffic, but it does give you the richness of identifying what's on the port in fine-grained detail than you would typically get from flow. I'll show you that as well. In fact, you know what? Let's jump straight into that. I'm going to show you what that looks like within our system. So within ENA, we've got, this is what it would look like once you've just logged in. I'm going to navigate. In fact, I won't even navigate. I'm going to, at this point, use an NBAR dashboard. If you look down here, I've got an NBAR dashboard. If I select it at the view level, it's going to show me all of the devices that potentially offer NBAR. The devices must, first of all, be capable of providing NBAR statistics, have that feature in their feature set, and it must be enabled. And it must be enabled on at least one port in order to be able to get any information about it. But this will show you which devices are potentially able to provide it. I'm going to click on that one, and we have an NBAR dashboard, which is operating now at the device level. This lists all of the different applications that potentially can be monitored. We're not going to be monitoring them all. We've got some of them turned on and some of them turned off. But it also shows me the ports on that device that have got some statistics available. It's also got some summarization here about the NBAR statistics. But I'm going to jump straight into one of those ports. I'm just going to click on the hyperlink here. That's now taken me to the NBAR dashboard at the port level. So there's three different NBAR dashboards, view, device, and port, for three subtly different purposes. Once we get down to the port level, you'll see that we actually show you timelines of the traffic, specifically for inbound traffic and outbound traffic shown separately. Put your cursor over and it'll tell you the color coding as to which color refers to which application. So it's taking those applications that you have identified that you want to be monitored. And you've got the other apps that you've said you don't want to monitor, listed as no. And you've also got a facility here called blacklisting. Now that's something that we've provided on top of NBAR that allows you to nominate one or more of these applications. You'll see one here, Telnet. That's been set up for blacklisting, and that would be a case of where you don't want certain application protocols to be on the network, and if you ever see any, then that's an indication of somebody doing something they shouldn't do, and you want to know about it. So here, if any Telnet was seen, and in fact we've got BitTorrent as well, if any BitTorrent was seen, then it would raise an event and a corresponding incident within Enturity to warn you that you've got undesirable traffic on that particular circuit. So that's configured at the port level. You can configure it at the device level, which means that all of the ports on that device will inherit that by default, but then you can override those settings on a per port basis. You'll also notice we've got an in-out coverage indicator, and that 100% means that you've got every single packet being classified based upon the applications that you've identified, the ones you want to be monitoring. Where it drops below 100%, it means that some of that traffic is in protocols that are not being monitored. So that's just an indication of just how complete your monitoring is. And you've got some summarization donut charts here as well. Very useful and very easy to take advantage of. All you need is the facility turned on, the feature turned on the devices, and you'll be getting those statistics now. Let's jump into the topic of Cisco's ACI. If I were to navigate back and take a look here at a Cisco APIC that I've taken under management via its API, with the APIC infrastructures, monitored infrastructures, you're going to have leaf and spine networks. Maybe one, maybe multiple leaf and spine networks deployed, controlled by one or more APICs. Now, these leaf and spine networks, each one is called a pod. In this case, I've got one pod, and you'll see that I can drill into that and see what that pod comprises. This is a very simplistic one that has one spine switch. In a real network, you'd have 3 or more spine switches, and then you've got a number of leaf switches. Each leaf switch is connected to every spine switch. That's how leaf and spine is architected. And you've also got the APIC controller listed as well. So you'll have an APIC controller and a bunch of leaf switches, a bunch of spine switches. You can get into the statistics and configuration of each of these. You can see what they are. Let me jump into the spine switch, just hyperlink down to it, and you'll see that we've got a summary dashboard specifically designed to show what's relevant on a spine switch. And so there are various concepts here. You've got things like the supervisor cards, power supplies, line cards, and fan trays. You can drill into each one of these to get the full details. And you've also got a concept, the ACI faults. Now, this is a concept within the APIC, various bits of information indicating anomalies, they turn into what they call a fault. We are able to pull those back and display them. Now, we're not actually turning these into Enturity events and incidents. There's so many of them, you just flood the system. But they are incredibly useful to look at when you know that it is worth looking at them. Okay, that's an important point. When is it worth looking at these? That's where the concept of health comes in. The APIC has various synthetic metrics that it generates, which are referred to as health metrics. They range from 0 to 100%. 100% is squeaky clean, absolutely healthy. 0% represents dead. And what Cisco recommend by default is that if any of those health metrics drop below 90% as a rule of thumb, then it's worth looking at it. And at that point, we have threshold-based events that we'll raise with the corresponding incidents. You can set that threshold. They all default to 90%. And if it drops below that, then we'll raise an event to warn you that it's time to go in and find out what's going on. Then it's worth digging in to the faults to find more information about what's actually happening and where you ought to apply some corrective action. So that's the fundamentals of how that works. We're looking at the hardware here. If you were to go back, and you can navigate back on the breadcrumb line up here, if we go back, then you've got the tenants. This is a multi-tenant style architecture, and each tenant has various common aspects, various concepts, including bridge domains, application profiles. It's got its own range of faults and its own health metrics. So that there are a variety of concepts that are interrelated, and if we go down to a profile, an application profile, you'll see we've got various other things. We've got the port groups here, and we've got faults associated with those as well. So a lot of information being able to be gathered and presented about an ACI environment, and also bear in mind that the switches themselves can also still be SNMP managed, and that's relevant because we can still pull in the topology information from them and all of their port level activity and resource utilization from the switches directly. And also they've got flow export capability, and so if you're managing them directly, then you can take advantage of the flow monitoring through ENA as well. So there's a whole bunch of complementary monitoring technology that can be brought together. Just going to take a look now at the cloud extensions. I'm going to just take Microsoft Azure, as it's the newest, as an example, but the similar concepts go across Azure, AWS, and the VMware monitoring. Even though it's done differently, we normalize it up at the dashboard level. And so here, for example, I've logged into my Azure environment, got different hypervisors in various different parts of the world, and if you were to select one of these, like the South Central US, then it would show you the activity there. We've got a couple of virtual machines. These are actually turned off at the moment, but if they were live, you'd be able to drill in and see a whole raft of information, and that's going to be presented in what's referred to as a scrolling dashboard. And so we've got information on the disk activity, memory, CPU, and if you scroll down, there's even more down below, including the in and out traffic at the virtual machine level. And then remember, that's important because it influences how much you have to pay on a monthly basis to the cloud vendor as part of your subscription. So that's how that works, and you've got very similar approaches across the others. So with that, I'm going to pass control back to Pete, who's going to tell you about a couple of other things that we've added in this ENA release.
Thanks, JD. We'll continue on, and we'll do just a bit of review. In the last couple sessions, we talked about the new web charts, and we talked about a new feature that allows you to include a level of trend analysis and some level of prediction across, things like CPU utilization or other time series data. And what we had reviewed previously was, in my case here, I'm looking at a device summary dashboard. And for CPU utilization, I can certainly go into the menu and open this up in a new tab. And at that point, I can go in and add in a prediction, in my case 1 month, and also include a trend line to be able to visually see where CPU is going on this device. This is pretty flat-lined, but you can do that all from the edit menu in the dashboard menus here. So selecting this and enabling the trend line and showing a prediction, based on a month or 6 months or a week, however you'd like to do it. So this is what we covered in the previous sessions. Now I'd like to take this a step further, because the trend analysis and that level of prediction is available for any time series attribute. So whether it's device-based, QoS-based, port-based, anything that's time series in Intuiti can leverage that type of new analysis capability that we've got. I'm going to show you an example because I'm interested in looking at services. So services, again, a function within Intuiti that allows me to collect multiple attributes together for things like multiple circuits to a remote site and put them together in a service definition. And I'm looking at the services dashboard here. I'm just going to drill into New York as an example. And a feature within the service modeling that Intuiti provides is the ability to track, maintain threshold event alert on the amount of traffic at the service level. So in my case, I've got more than one interface that's going to New York, and I've got aggregate inbound and outbound traffic that I'm monitoring. Now, I like this. This is a good dashboard, but what I'd like to do is understand a little bit more effectively what the trend is for my New York office. When am I going to hit some level where I have to do a capacity improvement at the site level? So I've created another dashboard for this, and I've actually just called this a service summary with trends. And I've made some changes to the default summary dashboard. Now, I could make this my default summary if I wanted to, just by changing the name like we discussed in our last session. But I just moved some of the dashlets around, reordered them, and then I split up the inbound and outbound traffic. And what I did here was gave myself a little bit more data to work with and I added in a 6-month prediction and gave myself a trend line across each one of these web charts. So this is really handy and really effective. If I actually open this up in a new tab, you can see I can certainly modify that, or if I went into the edit dialog, because this is my own dashboard, you can see how I've modified the dashlet to do that. So I'm selecting the data series, and I'm enabling the trend line, and I'm then predicting the value in the next 6 months as to what is my bandwidth going to be to New York in 6 months. So this is really handy. Again, the reason for showing this today is to show you that you can build dashboards where the charts have got this built in. I don't have to select a chart and dynamically or on demand show the trend line. I can build it in as a standard chart. Now, let me just get out of this so I can show a good screen. We've been discussing today product changes that you can see. Over the last couple of weeks, we also discussed dashboard things that you can see, and these are all new in ENA. But we also are continuing to work and make back-end improvements. So each release has got a set of improvements, and in this version of ENA, we've made significant improvements in the area of discovery performance. Now, historically, some of the processes that we use have been single-threaded, but in this release, we've completely re-architected these, and as a result, we're seeing up to a 5x improvement in discovery. So what are you going to see as a result of this? What you'll see is faster updates in the UI in cases where you make changes to things like port descriptions or make changes to device attributes like system location fields or contact information. So as we pull and collect this information, it's being visually brought into the system, into the UI, much faster. So a benefit that you're going to get by leveraging this is in one case where if you're using content filters to build views and your content filters are based on a regex of a location. So, or maybe you're building content filters that are saying only include certain interfaces, and you're doing a regex of the actual interface description. Because we're doing a more efficient job of collecting and bringing those updates into the system, these views are going to be updated even more effectively. In addition, if you're using the event management system and leveraging rules that might take a port description and apply a different rule based on a different description, or a different rule based on the location of a device, the EMS is going to leverage those attributes, and because we're updating these attributes even more effectively, these rules are going to take advantage of that as well. So I think with that, we've covered the content and topics that we wanted to go through in today's ENA Friday. So let's take a look and see if there's any questions on the chat panel. Pat, has anything come in?
Yep, we have a few, Pete. And the first question is NBAR included in the product, or is there an extra charge?
Okay, well, let me take that one. The good news to all of our participants today is that NBAR support is included in the standard license. So if you're monitoring Cisco equipment, then you will be able to see the NBAR statistics if it's enabled on those devices as soon as you upgrade to ENA without any effort on your part and no extra expense.
Okay, thanks, JD. And then wrapping around NBAR as well, what devices are covered within NBAR?
Okay, it's primarily Cisco routers and devices with routing capability. So anything with the NBAR capability in their feature set will be supported. And by the way, that license question you asked about NBAR, it's worth noting that the virtualization and cloud technologies that I covered earlier, those are also covered in the standard license. So you just need to pay per instance. With the cloud, it's an instance for the overall support, and then a device instance for each of the hypervisors. But there's no module price for the functionality.
Okay, that's JD. And then looks like the final question is, can I predict out further than 6 months using the predictive threshold?
Pete, do you want to take that one?
Certainly, absolutely you can. Now let me share my screen again. We can show an example of this. In the web charts with the new prediction capability, that is locked into 6 months as kind of that maximum prediction level. But if I take a look at this, and actually I'm going to show you something, an example that I was working on earlier that might highlight this a little bit better. But this is a web chart where I've changed my prediction to say, when will it reach 5%? So I've actually got a downward utilization trend for this interface. And I'd like to know when it gets pretty close to 0 where I maybe can turn this off or reallocate what's connected to it. And the way that you can do that is in the edit dialog, if I go into the series and go into the show prediction, you notice that we had value over a period of time. But then there's the date by custom value. And that custom value is actually dependent upon the metric that you're monitoring, and in my case, this is percentage. So I'm putting a custom value of 5 in here, and the system's going to tell me when, at what point in time, if I hit save, I'm actually going to get to 5%. So that's another way to look at it. Now, if I want to look at a 1-year projection, I can actually do that with the Intuity reports. If I'm looking for things like CPU memory and interface utilization, the standard planning reports actually have a projection that goes out 1 year. And if you wanted to extend that or modify that, the custom report builder can be used to include that level of metric as well.
I think it's worth emphasizing as well that this new trending capability in the interactive charts applies to any metric that we have a time series representation for. So it doesn't just have to be one of the somewhat ordinary CPU and memory type values or bandwidth utilization. It could be a bit more of an esoteric metric from within some complex technology. It can apply to anything that we've got time series values from. Very useful indeed. Okay. Let me take the opportunity to talk about some aspects of how you get help on the system. We've changed the way that the documentation is provided. Rather than shipping PDF files and online help built into the product, what we now have is all of our help provided over the internet from Intuity, and it is still context sensitive. So there are help buttons available from many of the menus, the dashboard menus, the dashlet menus, and the main menu in the UI all have help icons, and they will take you in context into our online help services. And the beautiful thing about that is that that is going to be a living, breathing service that will be extended and enhanced on a frequent basis. So additional information will be added to give you a richer experience without having to wait for a new release of the product. So you would get there either from within the product or from going to our website. And let me just show you what the website itself looks like. This is the corporate website for Intuity, and you'll notice that up here you'll see a support menu. That takes you to the support home. This goes specifically for ENA. If I go to the support home, you can go into the ENA Help Center from here, but also get directly to the training site and also to a site to request professional services. We are pulling together all of our help services to make it easy for you to get at. If you were to go to the ENA Help Center, then this is what you would get to if you went directly from the product in the main menu. You can get to your Getting Started information, which includes the migration guide. That is mandatory reading. If you're going to be upgrading from a previous version, please go through that in detail. There's a lot of very, very important and useful information in here, and that will guide you through it. And then all manner of other topic-based information. We've changed the way that the help is structured. We think it's going to be far more useful to you. Now, you can also raise your tickets from in here. If you are a direct Entuity customer, you can raise support tickets. If you're a BMC customer, the initial tickets will still be raised within BMC. Very shortly, we're going to be offering BMC customers a service they've never had before, and that is that you're going to be able to then review and update tickets that have already been raised through BMC's support portal directly with Entuity. The initial raising is still through BMC, but you will be able to interact on those tickets once they've been raised. That's just a few weeks away now. Okay, other things going on here. Wanted to talk a little bit more about the whole migration and transition planning that you'll need to do to plan to move up to ENA from your existing release. Let's assume you're working with 16.5. You can also upgrade directly from 16.0. If you are going to be upgrading from an earlier version, as with previous releases, you're going to need to come up to date to either 16.0 or 16.5 before you do the hop to the latest release. So you're going to need to do some intermediate upgrades. That's explained in the migration guide. However, we've got some other facilities that are worth knowing about. On that home page I just showed you, there were a couple of buttons there inviting you to take part in a live demo. That gives you access to a live ENA server. What you'd get there is the user experience, not the administrative experience, but the user experience. You just click on it. It takes about 30 seconds to provide you information. You'll need to respond to an email just to authenticate yourself, and then you'll be straight in and have the user experience. You'll be able to navigate through the menus, navigate through the dashboards, navigate using the Explorer, and just see how it works. That's a great way to start. No installation on your part required. Now, the next step might be to jump straight into trying an upgrade in your pilot environment. Don't go straight into a production upgrade without piloting first, because you really do need to bring yourself up to date in terms of understanding the UI, the changes in the UI, and also, a very important point, any custom dashboard that had been created previously will not be automatically upgraded. We didn't do that because most of the parts of those custom dashboards would refer to other screens in the old UI that no longer exist. Therefore, there wouldn't be a lot of point in us upgrading the dashboard. You'll need to make a note of which custom dashboards you actually want to implement in ENA, and then implement them using the new ENA technology. If you want further details on how to go about that, refer back to last week's ENA Friday. Pat will be sending out the recording access details very shortly, and it's well worth reviewing what Pete showed last Wednesday about how to work with these dashboards. However, if you want an intermediate step before jumping into working in your pilot lab, if you, for example, didn't have a spare server or VM available, what you can do is just download the production package. Either if you're a BMC customer, download it from the BMC EPD portal, or if you're a direct Entuity customer, download it from the Entuity FTP site. And even if your production environment is deployed on Linux, if you've got a PC, a laptop or desktop with at least 8 GB of memory, just download the Windows version, install it on that PC. It'll auto-license for 30 days. You can take a few devices under management, maybe up to about 30, and just experience the complete ENA environment, soup to nuts. You've got all of the administrative capability, all of the user capability, and you can really build your skills and demonstrate it internally within your organization using a real copy of the package. Then move into the pilot lab. If you've got a multi-server deployment, I definitely recommend that you have more than one server instance within the pilot lab so that you can try upgrading not only your consolidation server, but also your, some of your remote servers to make sure that everything hangs together in your specific environment. Everybody's environment is just that little bit different. And finally, we sent out a product announcement by email a few days ago. If you've got it, that's fantastic. If you didn't get it, check your spam folder. If it's not in the spam folder, please let Pat know. Her email is on the screen, and she'll make sure that you get added to the email list so you don't miss out on that in the future. This is very important that you get notified when we are doing upgrades. We want you to be the first to hear. So make sure you're on our mailing list. And with that, it concludes the final of our 3 ENA Fridays for June. We hope that you've found them helpful in understanding the new and improved ENA. We'll forward you all of the session links for your reference. You'll be able to review the videos. But if you've got questions, do please feel free to reach out to your Intuity system engineers to run them by us. We're always here to help. Pat, yes?
We had one last question come in, and it's a good one, so I just wanted to interrupt. He might not have seen the earlier ENA, but his question is there a mobile app available for ENA?
Ah, right, okay. Now the answer is no, we don't have a mobile app. Typically a mobile app would be a dumbed down, lightweight interface into a product. What we've got is complete mobile access into the real application through the mobile web browser. If you connect via your smartphone or a tablet to an Intuity server running ENA, then the screen and the dashboards will auto rearrange to optimize to the client you're using to view it with. So for example, if you're viewing from a smartphone, then it won't try and stuff all of those dashlets on the same page because you wouldn't be able to read them. What it will do is it will rearrange them so you can scroll up and down and get at the information in a convenient way. That means that you've got the complete experience within the scope of your user account permissions that you would have on the desktop, on the tablet, and the smartphone. So if you're permitted to do something at the desktop, you can do it from your phone as well. You could be sitting in a meeting and still being able to check what's going on your Intuity environment. And that's something that we're calling the knock in the pocket. How about that for a catchy phrase?
Coincidentally, on this screen right here, there's a snapshot of the mobile app.
That's right. So that's how it would look like on a smartphone through the mobile browser. Okay, one other thing, just a note, keep an eye on your email. There's a likelihood that we're going to do yet another ENA Friday at the end of July. So just make sure that you don't miss that one. So thanks for attending, and we look forward to hearing about how you're using ENA in the months to come. Keep us informed. Bye now.